So this has been a long time coming, by which I mean technically less than a year, but I have made a lot of references to the DCEU in a lot of other videos, especially with my videos that deal with the DCEU and surrounding media as well. And this is going to be a part of a larger series, DC-Ember. There are 5 Fridays this month, and I'm going to release a review of a DCEU movie on every single one. I'm also going to do the same for March with Marvel movies that I'm going to call Marvelous March. Why? Because I hate myself. I hate myself so much. So much. For this endeavor, I'm going to review Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, Snyder's Justice League, Wonder Woman, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of Harley Quinn, and if I'm still doing this in a year, I can do other movies then. But I was requested by a friend of mine and a patron ages ago to do the Snyder Cut, and because that movie is so entrenched in the details and follies of the movies that came before it, I feel like doing that without at least reviewing Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel wouldn't be right. I'm doing the other movies because I also like reviewing good movies, and Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and the Snyder Cut are less than good. Let's find out why. Content warning. This video will contain fantastical PG-13 violence of the superhero variety, talks of eugenics and genocide. It'll also contain specific references to Man of Steel and the rest of the DCEU, most of which is bad. Viewer discretion is advised. This will obviously contain spoilers for Man of Steel and probably references to the DCEU and DC properties as a whole. If you don't want that to be a part of your life, well, then you're not going to be watching my videos for a month. See you in January, I guess. The movie opens up on Jor-El, played by Russell Crowe, and Laura L., played by Ayelet Zurer. God, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who's giving birth. Then we cut to Jor-El warning some council on Krypton, Soup's original planet, that because they've mined out the core of the planet, they're totally fucked. With that going on, he has a plan to theoretically save the Kryptonian species, but it won't save them. Despite having really awesome interstellar technology that has spanned the entire cosmos that we find out about later, I guess gas prices are just too high, even on Krypton. What a shame. Zod, played by Michael Shannon, bursts in and says that degeneracy has fucked over the entire planet, and opens fire on the council. Then he flees and gets on some animal rejected from Avatar, and they fly away as the planet starts to do the whole collapse thing. He gets over to some watery space and steals a skull. It turns out that this is a magic skull that has the entire genetic code of all of Krypton, or at least Kryptonians, on it. One of Zod's goons tries to stop him, but because there's a disaster going on, Zor-El manages to escape and gets back on the creature and flies home, where we meet up with Laura L. again. He dissolves the magic skull thing into Clark. They load him up, and Zod stops by to borrow some salt from Zor-El's blood. Zor-El and Zod fight, and apparently our boy Zor is a fucking badass, for being some paper-pushing science geek. He kicks the shit out of Zod, and he retrieves it by stabbing him. He tries to fire on the ship that Baby Cal is in, but is interrupted by another ship stopping by to pick them up for a celebration. Zod is going to super prison. I'll drink to that. He seems like a dick. Cal's ship takes off, and Zod and his crew are sentenced to prison forever, or something. We cut to years later, on Earth, with Clark, played by Henry Cavill, being all tall and handsome and bearded. Unlike me. He saves a guy who's just being a dick from being crushed by a falling cage thingy. Then it is found out that there's an oil refinery that is currently really hot. And not just because of all of the strong, strapping men, but also because it's on fire. Actually, mostly because it's on fire. Our boy goes there and rescues some people and does his daily exercises of holding up an entire fucking steel scaffolding structure, and we get to see his body. And I feel inadequate. But that's because I am. But I'm also a better writer than anyone this movie had, So I guess all things balance out, right? Clark lands in the ocean, and we get a flashback of when he was very young, probably elementary school. His super senses are kicking in, and his x-ray vision are all wonky, and he freaks the fuck out and runs. Martha comes by and says, "Hey, it's okay. People are gross inside, but that's also where they keep all of their delicious blood." In this joke, Martha is a vampire. Also, his heat vision comes in, so that's pretty cool. Fortunately, vampires are immune to heat vision, probably. Adult Clark washes up on shore and steals some clothes, since he can't just walk around half naked all the time, unfortunately. Then we get another flashback, not even 2 minutes after the first one, because Clark sees a school bus, and that reminds him of the time when he was in an accident and he pushes the school bus out of a river after a tire popped and it decided to cool down with a quick dip. The scene continues with one of the parents of the children that he saved being pretty spooked but grateful, claiming that it's divine providence. Jonathan Kent, played by Kevin Costner, confronts Clark about this, and Clark said,
"What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?"
And Jonathan says the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard.
Maybe.
This dumb fuck says maybe. Fucking maybe. Maybe those kids should have died. Fucking maybe those kids should have drowned when Clark could have saved them. That's dumb as hell. And goes completely against what John and Clark usually stand for. But I'll get to that later. Clark feels like he's been cursed by God with these powers, but John shows him the ship that he came in on and espouses how important he thinks Clark might be.
You're the answer, son. You're the answer to "Are we alone in the universe?"
There's this recurring motif where Clark is compared to God and Jesus, and this honestly strikes the same chord.
It'd be a huge burden for anyone to bear, but you're not just anyone, Clark, and I have to believe that you were sent here for a reason.
Also, John gives Clark the alien USB and says that he had it checked out by a metallurgist, and apparently it's a new element found nowhere on Earth. But Clark totally has to keep his identity secret. But fucking John can just reveal an alien mineral to everyone because there's no way he could have kept it a secret. Maybe he murdered the metallurgist. Maybe the real reason he wanted Clark to let those kids die is because he's a psychopath, and it's the only way he can climax. And that's the real reason that he and Martha never had kids of their own. He just can't when she's breathing, and she's not into bondage. Clark gets a job as a bartender next, and some asshole is groping a waitress, and Clark intercedes because, he had to do something that was Superman-like eventually. The man pours a beer on him and tries to push him around and then throws an empty beer can at him. And Clark, very calmly, very rationally, decides to impale his fucking truck with the logs that it was transporting. Which is pretty fundamentally a problem with this fucking movie. But I'll get to that. And John Kent. Anyway, Clark abandons this as well and starts hitchhiking like he's the fucking Hulk. And gets further into Canada, which has had some objects discovered encased in ice. From there, we cut to Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, landing at the same time. Clark can be seen in the background and apparently got a job with the Joint Military Task Force as Joe. We establish that Lane is a hard-nosed reporter who will not be discouraged by anything.
I gotta confess, Miss Lane, I'm not a fan of the Daily Planet, but those pieces you wrote when you were embedded with the 1st Division well, they were pretty impressive.
Well, what can I say? I get writer's block if I'm not wearing a flak jacket.
You're early.
We were expecting you tomorrow.
Which is why I showed up today.
Which would be great characterization if she didn't suck so much ass in the next couple of movies. But for now, she's fine. She stands up to Colonel Nathan Hardy, played by Christopher Maloney, who I'm going to be referring to as SVU. She goes out and catches a picture of Joe, who's a tall drink of coffee, if you know what I mean. She decides that she's going to follow him. Turns out that he's melting his way to the object, meaning that Clark is officially making global warming worse. He gets to the ship, which has apparently been buried in the ice for like 20,000 years. Clark inserts the USB drive, and a security system for the ship tries to stop him because it's not been updated in 20,000 years, despite being still compatible with that old ship. But since he's still fucking Superman, good luck with that one, bud. He walks around the ship and explores for a bit. Lois climbs up as well and busts out her camera and tries to take a picture of the security drone, but it fucking hates the paparazzi.
Look, Vegeta, the paparazzi. I have to protect my image!
So it fucking stabs her, breaking the camera. Clark hears that and rushes to her side and breaks the security drone with his manly muscles of manliness. He reveals that she's bleeding internally and applies some tender, loving care to her in the form of a motherfucking eye laser. Hot. Literally. And this is mildly uncomfortable for her. Clark then apparently flies the fucking ship somewhere else, and the military in this universe is pretty fucking incompetent because they never find it. Also, Clark is shit at aftercare because he just drops Lois off in the snow. Like, not even in camp or anything. Just on the ice. She's rescued and writes up an article about that, and that's probably the most unrealistic thing about this. The Daily Planet is still doing fine, not all clickbaity bullshit yet, like this story would be. Perry White, played by Lawrence Fishburne, refuses to publish it, so she leaks it via one of her other contacts, and goes on trying to find some more details about her apparent savior, probably to teach him about proper bondage rules. Clark strikes me as a sub, and Lois has a little bit of Dom in her, at least. Clark is still in the ship, and has figured out how to activate it, and Zor-El's shade starts haunting him. That's when we get a bunch of exposition. Apparently, Kryptonians were imperialists that sent out ships all over the place, and their empire started failing at some point, but the movie never explains why. They also started doing eugenics in order to help propagate the species better, but that never works out well. Eugenics is a bad plan. Clark is the first natural-born child in a really, really long fucking time. In addition, Zor-El stashed the genetic code of their whole-ass species with Clark. Zori is hoping Clark will figure out how to integrate the two species together, and he says that the reason that Clark has so many cool powers is because the sun is younger, and the atmosphere and gravity are less harsh than on Krypton, which is, pretty cool. We give Clark his super suit, and he tries flying for the most time. And much like any kid trying out a bike for the first time, promptly crashes. But also, like most kids, he tries again and does a bit better. Perry figures out that Lois leaked her story and takes her badge and gun for 3 weeks, which conveniently gives her the time to research Clark more. She tracks him down to Smallville and asks around a bit, including that kid that he saved as a child who almost drowned in the bus accident. Clark says hi and takes her on a lovely first date to his dad's grave. How romantic. And we get a flashback story for Lois about the last time that Clark and John were together. Clark wants to help out the world, and John thinks that's a bad plan because he's, again, dumb as hell. A tornado touches down just in front of them, and John ultimately decides that he'd rather be sucked off instead of continuing an argument. And we've all been there, right, fellas? I'm sorry. That joke is gross. But I need to do something to distract me from the fact that this is stupid as hell. And gross jokes are all that I have at this point. Clark visits Martha. No, not that Martha. Not that Martha either. That's the one played by Diane Lane. And reveals that he's discovered his origin, and his mom's a bit worried, but Clark assures her that he's a total badass. But then the plot starts to kick in. That's right, it's like an hour into the movie, and we haven't even gotten to the primary conflict yet. Jesus Christ, this movie's long. Zod hacks into every television and phone on the planet and informs them in every language relative to their, where they are, that if they don't turn in Kal-El within 24 hours, they're going to murderate the planet. This gives Clark an existential crisis because, frankly, John is an idiot. He says, "Take me to church." And we get another Jesus allegory where we put Clark in the same frame as Jesus praying. But he's asking if humanity is worth saving, which doesn't seem very Jesus-like to me. I'm no Christian, but it seems to me that Jesus was pretty clear on the decision there, at least in most cases. The priest says that he has to make a leap of faith. The military and FBI arrest Lois because she knows about the Ubermensch, and she's like, well, shit, dog. Soups comes by and surrenders to the military as long as he can get her released and does an interview with her. We have another Jesus comparison where Clark reveals that he is, in fact, 33 years old.
So you can't expect us to not take precautions. You could be carrying some kind of alien pathogen.
Been here for 33 years, Doctor.
Because Zack Snyder does not know what subtlety is. The military decides to hand Clark over because they're assholes. They meet up with Feora Ol, played by Aunt J. Trow, in some desert. And, oh no, she's hot. She's so fucking hot. But also, on the other hand, she's wearing very human makeup. Like, Kryptonians apparently decided, along with us, that lipstick and mascara, eyeshadow, and probably a bunch of other stuff that I can't even see or recognize, because I was never taught how to be pretty. Like, they just decided to have the exact same makeup conventions as us. That's kinda weird, bruh. They could have made her just look more alien. All of them, really, but I'm just noticing it because of her specific makeup is so contrast to her character in so many ways. It's probably sexism on my part, but hey, what can you do? Anyway, she's here to collect Cal and Lois for some reason. Like, I don't really understand why. She never really clarifies as to why either. And all Lois does is allow Clark to escape later, so what the fuck is the point of that outside of a plot contrivance? Whatever. So Clark gives her the USB MacGuffin, and Zod introduces himself. Clark gets weaker because of the atmosphere in the ship, and he collapses, but Zod assures her that he's just adjusting. Probably. Zod enters his mind somehow and gives the big bad guy speech. It basically amounts to, "Hey dog, I want to recreate the Kryptonian species. You down? Also, to do so, we have to kill the rest of the life on Earth for some reason. Despite the fact that Kryptonians can obviously adapt pretty well. No? But what if I drowned you in skulls? Well, that's a shame. 'Cause I'm gonna anyway. Fuck you." Oh, and, like, the reason that Zod and crew took so long to find Clark is because after Krypton blew up, they were released from the Phantom Zone, and they decided to tour the galaxy as the worst black metal band ever. Zod was on vocals.
I will find him!
Feora was lead guitar, and the big tall guy was on drums, and that was the whole band. No keyboardists, no rhythm guitar or bass, which is lame as hell. But also, Cal accidentally triggered a beacon when he was busy pushing buttons on the unfamiliar ship. We cut to Lois, and she inserts the USB into the slot, and Russell Crowe is back! Fuck yes! He guides Lois through the ship as he's changing the atmosphere to give Clark his superpowers back. Fucking sweet. He has telekinetic control over the ship and gestures to beat people up. Lois picks up a snazzy gun and he guides which one of his people to shoot and how. He wakes up strapped to the table, and some skinny crypto-fascist steals his blood and checks out how eugenicsy we can get, boys. Unfortunately, Lois Lane never had a chance to teach him about safe words, so Clark can't escape yet. He guides her to an escape pod, and Feora tries to have a catfight with her, but that's delayed for at least a few more minutes. That's okay. I know who I would put my money on. Crow appears before Clark just after he had freed himself, and the eugenic scientist pieced the fuck out. He reaffirms that Clark can save the world, and that he's super important. Clark bursts out of the ship and does a fucking cross pose in the middle of space because we hadn't gotten the goddamned message yet. Yes, he's a Jesus allegory. He then charges after Lois's failing escape pod and rescues her. Zod and crew land at Kent Farm and demand to know where the Codex is. Being a badass, Martha refuses to tell them. until she's lifted off her feet. She then lets it slip that her son's ship is in the barn. Feora checks it out, and the Codex isn't there. Clark tackles Zod and beats the shit out of him for threatening his mom. They plow through downtown Smallville, which conveniently has a 7-Eleven, a Sears, an IHOP, a U-Haul, and a bunch of other convenient product placements. Zod and he brawl for a while, and the military shoots at both of them because they're also dumb as hell. Soups manages to damage the atmosphere regulator that Zod is wearing, and he starts freaking the fuck out because of the sensory overload. He tags out, and Feora and the black metal drummer tag in, and they destroy yet more of the town, and fight some more. The military tries to attack them again, but the two Kryptonian in black kick the shit out of them, and Feora flirts with SVU.
A good death has its own reward.
Clark manages to save him just before she praying mantises him, but, she could eat my head anytime. Either of them. They push back and fight some more. Soups throws the large Kryptonian named Namek into the train yard and starts to fight Feora before Not Quite Piccolo throws back a fucking train car and destroys the Sears. Feora and Not Piccolo retreat, and Clark steps out of the ruins of the store, surrounded by the military. But Mr. SVU decides that Clark has pretty blue eyes, and is thus trustworthy. Back on Zod's ship, the eugenics scientist reveals that Clark's genetics contain the Codex, and that he doesn't need to be alive to use it. So Zod releases the dubstep machine on either side of the planet. Clark checks in on Mom, and she's widely okay. General Swanwick, who has been in the movie like the entire time, but I didn't bother introducing him, played by Henry Lennox, and Dr. Hamilton, played by Richard Schiff, who's also been in the movie for a while, watch in horror as the planet starts to be warped by the bass drop. But Deus Ex Clark comes in with a plan. They're going to use the Phantom Drive in his space pod to send all of these bastards back to the Phantom Zone.
This ship is powered by something called a Phantom Drive. It bends space. Zod's ship uses the same technology, and if we can make the two drives collide with one another...
A singularity can be created.
Like a black hole. Yeah, if we open up this doorway, then theoretically they should be pulled back in.
While the military flies to that spot in Metropolis, Clark will take on the one in the Indian Ocean. Lois is worried about him, worrying that the kryptonite on the machines will make him sick again.
If that thing is making Earth more like Krypton, won't you be weaker around it?
But he finally says something that actually sounds like Superman.
Maybe. I'm not about to let that stop me from trying.
You might want to step back a little bit.
Miracle of miracles. The military tries to get close, but the bass that the dubstep machine is dropping is just too powerful. And a lot of people die. Dr. Hamilton and Lois struggle to figure out how to activate the machine. Zod has a conversation with Zor-El's Shade, and the conflict of the movie is revealed.
Our people can coexist.
So we can suffer through years of pain trying to adapt like your son has?
You're talking about genocide.
Yes, and I'm arguing its merits with a ghost.
We're both ghosts, Zod. Can't you see that? Krypton you're clinging onto is gone.
Eugenics versus natural birth. Living together versus genocide. And Zod's an idiot. He deletes Russell Crowe. Rip in peace, bud. You are my favorite character. And that includes Feora, who, while hot in that goth way that I adore, fundamentally misunderstands morality and evolution.
The fact that you possess a sense of morality, and we do not, gives us an evolutionary advantage.
Anyway, Clark manages to take down the one in the Indian Ocean. Metropolis is half destroyed by the other half of the dubstep machine, but the military flies their plane into it with the activated Phantom Drive. SVU flirts back with Feora as he does so.
A good death is its own reward.
The Kryptonians are sucked up into the drive, and Lois goes skydiving, which is fun. Zod is pissed because now that he can't do genocide, he can't come. And I can't come since the hottest person in the movie is gone. Fuck. Soups and Zod do a punchy in the middle of Metropolis, and I hear a lot of complaints about these scenes, and the ones in Smallville, and I agree with them. The detractors think that we're blaming Clark for the damage, but these scenes do show that Clark kind of does have a callous disregard for human life. He just accepts that this is where they have to fight, and this means that Clark is officially dumber in the DCEU than Goku.
Where did you get that muffin?
Muffin button?
But I never installed a muffin button.
Then where did I get this muffin?
Goku knows to take the fight to an empty desert. Clark does not. They hug for a while and are about to fuck, and Zod gets all hot and bothered and shoots out a fiery eye load at a family. But Soups edges him for like 20 seconds. Eventually, Soups finishes him off with a snap, crackle, and pop. Having a crisis because he's not a necrophiliac, and he didn't finish, he starts crying, and Lois comes out to comfort him. The next scene has Soups crash down a satellite in front of General Not John Jones yet, and tells the military to stop trying to track him. The military girl behind General Not John Jones yet is turned on by this.
I just think he's kind of hot.
Which is fair. He also gets a job at the Daily Planet or something, despite print media being basically dead. Hope he likes doing BuzzFeed articles. These 5 reporters are definitely not Superman, or whatever. So there is a lot of Jesus imagery in this movie, and comparisons. Jor-El starts it by saying that Cal will be like a god to us mere mortals.
He'll be a god to them.
There are talks of providence.
He saw what Clark did.
I know he did. I'm sure what he thought he saw
Was an act of God, Jonathan.
Framing Clark as a deific savior, and there's just a lot of it. And Superman as Aslan the Lion's Skinsona isn't exactly uncommon. It is kind of one of the most common Superman stories we have, but I don't think it works here. And I don't think it works for 2 reasons. One, Clark is never seen with people. Jesus hung out with prostitutes, gamblers, and tax collectors. He gave sermons to people, but he also just talked to people. He healed them, stuff like that. He'd tell them stories and parables. But the only time we see Clark with a group of people that aren't just the main cast is when he turns himself in. Every other time, like with the oil rig that he saves people, he's very separate from them. There's just a lot of space in the frame between he and them. Even when he starts to come down to the military and surrender, he's not only very separate from them, they're very far off and kind of blurry in the frame, he's above them. And that just sucks for Jesus imagery. Like, think about it. One of the most famous depictions of Jesus that we have is Jesus surrounded by his 12 friends. The only time that, we depict Jesus as really separate from people is when he's on the cross. Otherwise, he's always down around people. The other thing that really doesn't work is that because John Kent is a shit Christian in this movie, constantly questions whether or not it's worth his time to save people. Jor-El is a better Christian than John Kent by leaps and bounds in this movie.
You're as much a child of Earth now as you are of Krypton. You can embody the best of both worlds. Not if you guide them, Cal, but if you give them hope.
Jor-El wants him to be a symbol of hope. John Kent lets himself die to avoid letting a secret out that's literally known by the entire town. It doesn't work on any level. And while there are scenes that the less cynical Clark comes through in...
If that thing is making Earth more like Krypton, won't you be weaker around it?
Maybe. I'm not about to let that stop me from trying.
It's not enough to save that. So that theme just out and out fails. But I don't think that's the only reason that this movie doesn't work. In a previous video, I talked about why the Elite makes such a good foil for Superman. They really make him question himself and his place in the world before he decides to show them why he thinks he's right. We don't get that in this movie. This version of Zod is a bad villain for this version of Superman. All of the ideological arguments that are to be had are with Zor-El and Zod, not with Clark. Clark wants to be a hero. He wants to help people.
I just want to do something useful with my life.
But he doesn't seem to like or trust the people that he's supposed to be protecting.
What does your gut tell you?
God can't be trusted. Problem is, I'm not sure if the people of Earth can be either.
Zor-El gives him a goal, but it's left kind of vague until he spills it to Zod when Clark isn't even around.
Our people can coexist. So we can suffer through years of pain trying to adapt like your son has?
You're talking about genocide.
Yes, and I'm arguing its merits with a ghost.
We're both ghosts, Zod. Can't you see that? The Krypton you're clinging onto is gone.
What is the ideological disagreement between Soups and Zod? Don't commit genocide? Cool, not much of a challenge there. Most people are going to not want to commit genocide. Choosing Kryptonians over humans, or vice versa, it's unnecessary. It's not a conflict. If Zod was just less of a shithead, he'd realize that Clark has thrived here, and that Kryptonians as a whole could too. But he's too selfish, and Clark doesn't even seem to realize that's a possibility. You could make this more interesting pretty easily. Dial back Zod a bit. I like Michael Shannon in this movie. I think that he is one of the more interesting characters, but give him a more realistic goal. Hell, here's an idea. Just make it so that in order to get the Codex, he has to kill Soups. He doesn't want to. Soups is his kin, but it's one man versus his whole species. Clark would have to grapple with that himself. Clark isn't a bad person, necessarily, in this movie. Just a little bit more selfish and petty than I feel he should be. So make Clark choose between himself and his species. Then realize that the people of Earth still need him, and that Zod doesn't care about them. He's not going to actively genocide them, but he also doesn't really care if they live or die. He doesn't care if the people who raised Clark survive, made Clark who he is today, die. That's a better story, and it really doesn't change a whole lot in the movie. And that's just what I came up with in like 2 minutes of thought about it. So Soups is the core of the DCEU, which makes sense. Soups, Bats, and Diana are often the core of the DC universe. Not always, but a lot of the time. The issue is that with this version of Soups, it's just kind of flat. He's callous and petty and doesn't seem to care much for the people he's meant to be a symbol of hope to. So it's no surprise that when the franchise is trying to get off the ground, that it also fell kind of flat. This movie isn't bad, necessarily. I don't like it, but there are things that you can take from it that are useful. I just also think that at the core of it, Superman isn't a good basis for an entire universe if you're not going to understand what makes Superman work. But Snyder has had a long habit of missing the points in superhero movies. He fucked up Watchmen even though he basically recreated it panel for panel. He doesn't understand the themes of what he's trying to adapt. He wants them to be darker and grittier, but doesn't realize why that may not work for every occasion. And it only gets worse from here, folks. But hey, if you made it this far in this undoubtedly incredibly too long video, you probably like superheroes. Or you like me. Or both. That's a bad life decision. But I have a book for you. I'm writing a superhero fiction myself, and you can read it for free. Smash Gal and Esvanir deals with some of the grittiness and harshness of the world that superheroes would plausibly exist in, but without trying to strip superheroes of all of the things that make them fun. It's about Smash Gal, a super strong, super fast woman who can fly and wants to help people. But she discovers that while she can help individuals, her powers fall short of substantial change in some ways. It also stars Esvanir, a cynical thief who feels that trillionaire superheroes don't always have the best interest of the people that they're saving at heart, and decides to steal some of that technology that they have and provide it to people who need it more, people who couldn't afford it. There's more to it, like the social media presences of superheroes and their relationships to brands and such, and, you know, all of the other stuff that would come with it. I think it's a lot of fun. Check it out. The link is in the description. And hey, while you're checking out my book, why not do me another favor? I know, I'm asking a lot, but this should be pretty quick. why not comment another movie for me to talk about? And like this video. Subscribe to the channel to make sure that you don't miss the rest of DC-Ember. And share this video with your favorite Snyder stan so that they can dislike and mass flag the video. Or maybe they can listen to why I don't like this movie and realize that even if I don't like it, that doesn't mean that they can't. Anyway, this has been Sean, your holy movie reviewer, signing off. That would work a lot better if I still had the beard. Oh well. But then the Paul blart starts to kick in.